Now, the course information is very practical information in terms of creating your own sustainable house design. So if you want to, do that and follow it through, construct your house and live in it, it will support that very effectively. It also works as a self-developmental tool, and effectively this is because our houses really are a reflection of who we are. So as we embark on the house design process, we get a very, very good opportunity of looking at what our life is all about and the direction that we want it to take. So this aspect of architecture became very clear when I started teaching back in 1989, the sorts of houses people were creating, and then how they were living in those houses after they were constructed, were clearly very, very much part of their lives. And then if we look at the vernacular tradition, we can see this same coincidence of architecture and identity, where the houses people were creating within those architectural traditions and who those people were effectively one and the same thing. And in fact, this is largely the basis of culture. Those strong identifying things effectively got lost as we moved into the industrial era, and effectively people gave up traditional shelter making. In fact, they embraced a new survival methodology, leaving behind the food and shelter equation of the agrarian way of life to embrace really paid employment and the new job culture, where effectively you gave up your time and you gave up the facility to create your own shelter, and then you embraced this new survival mechanism. And within that mechanism, third parties who were really just self-interested and profit motivated started creating the shelter, and shelter necessarily then became something that was more expensive, and that introduced the whole idea of debt into the acquisition of shelter. So effectively things changed in a very, very, very major way, and the money aspects of the shelter making became a very, very important part of economies. Now, where that survival mechanism can now be seen to cause climate change and general environmental breakdown, it really creates a modern paradox and a real anomalous situation, where the actual survival mechanism itself is self-destructing. And this is what the new sustainable agenda really addresses, that within the ethos of sustainable development, we're all entitled to really live harmoniously with nature. And effectively this means we need to look at our own deep nature, and by embarking on the house design process, there's no better way of exploring those aspects of our lives. These are what I might call the intangibles. They're the more hidden aspects of our lives, and interestingly enough, the architecture reflects this, insofar as the architecture has a physical exterior and effectively an invisible interior. And we ourselves are not a lot different. We have a physical outside, and then we have this very, very strong inner world, which be made up of our emotions, our subconscious, and so on, our feelings. So this is the basis of the link between the architecture and the identity. And these intangible aspects that are the hardest to see. So effectively, when we look at buildings, we tend to look at the walls, we tend to look at buildings from outside. Effectively, because space is invisible, it's very hard to see it. When we see the walls, the floors and the ceilings that bound the space, we get an idea of the proportions of the space, but essentially because the space is invisible, it's quite difficult to see it. And if similar to ourselves, our physical exteriors oftentimes are not a reflection of what's actually going on inside us. And this is something, this emphasis on the physical is something that certainly accelerated over the last couple of 100 years, but I think it's been going on for much longer than this, and the current state of affairs physically in the world is really a reflection of this imbalance. So in a large part, this move towards sustainable living is trying to rebalance the physical and intangible aspects of life. So that might be seen as, you know, a rebalancing of the head and the heart, the head representing the more logical way that life has been approached, certainly over the last couple of 100 years, and then the heart representing our more intuitive and our more natural selves and our deeper nature. It could also be seen as a rebalancing of male and female. Again, the male representing the more physical parts of the building, and the female representing the sort of more abstract inner parts. And it's interesting that it's effectively men who design houses and construct them, so that this male principle is very, very strong. So, you know, these are the more hidden aspects of the course. These are the things that one will encounter as you move through the process, and it's a very interesting opportunity then to rebalance these things within ourselves, because I think this is really at the core of what I would call, you know, true sustainability. And we need to distinguish that true sustainability from, you know, what governments and big business are promoting as sustainable, which is really a form of false sustainability. And that sustainability is based on the idea of sustaining growth and sustaining progress. And the growth is sustained effectively by people taking out mortgages to shelter themselves and feeding money into the system all of the time. And because money is effectively an artificial concept, and the idea of money growth is an artificial concept, it's you know, when that is made real, it means that people are effectively, when they take out mortgages, they're borrowing this money and accepting the notion that the money that they borrowed is actually growing, and that in order to catch up with that growth, they have to pay money constantly in over long periods of time. This is effectively what keeps the economy going, and where it's based on people's very real need for shelter, it creates an enormous amount of pressure on people. And then when that can be seen to outpicture as causing the climate change and the environmental breakdown, it really is an anomalous situation that causes an awful lot of stress for people. So effectively the course allows us to look at this and to look at the role of mortgaging within the house design and construction process, and then how we might effectively ease ourselves out of that dilemma by making smaller houses, by exposing ourselves less to the market economy, and so on. Now the course information itself is very clearly structured into three primary parts: the handbook of house design and construction, a series of worksheets then that support design exercises that are articulated in the handbook, and a design program which really sets out the step-by-step process of creating your own design. The main thing about that design program, I suppose, that's different from conventional architectural practice, is that you create the plan at the very end of the process, and that's in contrast to the norm where the plan is created as soon as is possible. And that, for anyone who's been in that situation where you have a plan that you want to change, is very, very difficult to change a rigid plan. So the methodology I've developed allows us to look at each aspect of the design in turn, to look at all these intangibles, and then when all those things effectively have been examined, you assemble the plan at the end of that process. The steps are very clear, so those might represent the physical aspects of the course, as I spoke about earlier, and then the bits in between the steps could be considered to be the intangibles. So as one moves through this process, you'll find yourself, stirred up in various ways. You'll meet resistances, you'll be scratching your head, you'll be trying to make your mind up. These are important encounters. These resistances are very, very, very important to come across, because these are the places where we need to initiate change. So they reveal to us the sticking points, and by welcoming these resistances, we can begin to look at where we ourselves are stuck and where we can begin to initiate change. Effectively, we've all been programmed, to be good little borrowers and to participate in the economic system in a particular way. But like I say, where that system is in itself self-destructing, we effectively need to step outside it to a certain degree. Now that is probably the most difficult thing, where we've you know we've thrown our lot in with the modern economy. It's difficult then to step back from, particularly where we've been educated to participate in it in a particular way. So it's important to generate dialogue with people who are in the same process, perhaps to share information, to realize that shelter making was something that effectively people always helped each other to do, that you don't have to remain in isolation, that there's a lot of positive things that one can do, and this is very much strong thread that runs through the course, the idea of positive approach to all this, that sustainable development is in itself a wonderful thing. It's giving us an opportunity to look at the nature of the world, and it's giving us an opportunity to look at our own nature. And I think on an evolutionary level, this is essentially what's happening. We're being prompted towards another level of consciousness, another level of awareness, and this can only be a good thing. And it's by looking at these intangible aspects of life, by looking at intangible aspects of our own selves, that we can begin to understand our own selves in a deep way. In terms of the house designs that evolve out of the course, I suppose the range of activities the house can support is the most fundamental. That could be considered to be the foundation of your sort of physical building, that we have to look at facilitating work within the home, and certainly we have to look at a level of food production and possibly a level of fuel production on the land, that the house is effectively our survival mechanism, and that we need to make it as versatile and adaptable as is possible, that the changes that one can anticipate happening in the wider world, the house effectively will have to facilitate those changes, or if you wish to initiate change in your own life, that again the house can support this. The mortgaging, as I've mentioned earlier, very, very important, and this will directly relate to size and directly relate to how your house is constructed. If you're building on a small budget, you'll have to look at aspects of self-building and what are the realities of self-building. All of this points to making smaller buildings. Heating and ventilation, very, very major considerations. The general trend now is towards what's called zero heating demand, that effectively the building doesn't need a heat source within it other than the people, the lights, the machines that would be running, and the picking up the solar gain. So that effectively controls the orientation of the building, and it controls to an extent what the building is made of, and of course it relates very, very much to levels of insulation and heat storage capacity. In other words, that you can keep the heat in that you've captured, you can hold it within the building, and then it can be released. That really drives the orientation, the plan, layout to a certain extent, and certainly the materials and the construction system. Environmental aspects, very, very important. Aspects like plumbing, electrical generation, drainage, all very, very critical. How we relate, to the outside world, the immediate outside world of our, piece of land, and then further out into the world, that we have to get into this harmonization with nature. We have to look at natural process. We have to accept that natural processes are naturally slow and have a different time frame than what we've become used to. We've become used to what I would call machine time, that since the Industrial Revolution everything is speeded up. It's all based on the clock, but if we look at how the sun moves and we look at how the seasons change, it's all far slower. We need to embrace a slower way of life. We need to recapture our time. All of this is possible in the house design exercise, and then effectively you can transfer that over into reality by building a house where you've recaptured some of your time. So it's it's an enjoyable and it's a challenging process. It's important to make bonds with people who are carrying out the same thing. You can bring information from outside the course into the course structure very effectively and very easily. There's an abundance of information out there. The real challenge is how to utilize the information. So the structure the course offers, the clear step-by-step methodology, you can effectively bring that information in at any point. It's important to take your time. You can do a fast track version through the course just to quickly come to terms with what your costs are going to be, what your size is going to be, and then you can sort of move through the whole thing then at a slower pace and really give yourself the time to work it out, because it will stir up all this inner stuff that the physical aspects of the course really uncover these intangibles. And yeah, enjoy it. It's as you can see from some of the video information, it's an enjoyable process. It's a joy to live in your own home that you've created yourself, and to harmonize in a deeper way with life. All right, take care.